Donna Harris is one of the most influential ecosystem builders in American entrepreneurship. She co founded 1776, one of the most ambitious startup platforms of the last decade, built around the idea that innovation shouldn't be limited to Silicon Valley. Today, through builders and backers, she focused on helping everyday people turn ideas into action and expanding who gets to see themselves as entrepreneurs. But beneath all of that is a deeper question that has shaped much of her work. What kind of society produces builders in the first place? This conversation is about entrepreneurship, but also about opportunity, identity, belief, and the future of the American dream. That journey is to explore those moments where people are kind of setting out those chairs. And I'm calling it the ugly middle, where you've had the idea, right? And you're excited about it, and you start to kind of put some things out there into the world, and people don't always show up right away. And those chairs aren't filled automatically, and it takes a lot of guts and effort and systems to do that. And what I've heard feedback from the audience is they love the stories, but they also want, like, hey, what can I do? How can I apply this? Because I'm in that ugly middle right now, and it's great to know that other people have gotten through it, but I want to know how they did it. So that's kind of the purpose of this 50 Chairs, to kind of bring those stories to life, but then also share some of those practical, like, hey, this is how I got through that period of time where I was just looking at the chairs myself and wondering what was going to happen. So
Where are the people?
where are they? So, but I want to start a little bit earlier. I want to just explore for a moment with you. Success can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, but what did success look like for you growing up?
Interesting. I grew up in a family that is the very traditional work a career for a big company your whole life kind of parents, right? My dad worked for General Motors for nearly his entire career, and so did everyone else's parents around us. I didn't really have an entrepreneurial role model around me to think there's a different structure. So I never really questioned that. Went to college, thought I'm going to go get the job after college. What big company am I going to go work for? The sort of just like you do the career thing and work
Mhm.
your way up the ladder. That's what it's all about. And I got there and really hated it. It was like, I don't know what else is out there, but this cannot be it.
What did you hate about it? What was it about the experience that you're like, hey, this isn't me?
Yeah, I worked for some great companies, first of all. Like, the experience wasn't these were horrible places to work. I had phenomenal experiences early in my career. I worked for EDS, which is now HP, and at 21 years old, I'm wandering around the C-suite of General Motors, which at that point in time was one of the largest corporations in the world. And then I worked for Oracle, which obviously is a, amazing, storied, successful company. But I couldn't shake the feeling that if I did not show up for work tomorrow, they would find another Donna to plug right in my little cog, right? Like, it was this tiny little cog in this really, really big wheel that was utterly replaceable. And I didn't love that feeling. It didn't feel like a good investment of my life.
Mm.
And I know that, that's not the same that a lot of people feel, but for me it was a reflection of, wait a minute, let me not just assume that this is the way my career is going to go. Let me actually see if maybe there isn't something else out there. I didn't know what that something else was, but it was very much like a discontent that this cannot be all that there is here.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about that easily replaceable. I've definitely felt that before, even post acquisition, feeling like I just don't quite fit in. But was there a particular moment where something happened and you're in this company and you're like, I could leave tomorrow and my work may not matter. They're going to find somebody. Walk me through that a little bit.
Well, at the first moment that I felt it was when I was working for EDS. It was the first 5, 6 years of my career. And big, big, big tech company supporting big, big, big General Motors.
Mm,
One tiny little junior level person. And so, the the level of excitement around the activities I was doing, right? Not a lot of excitement around, please go pick up the tax return from, the print room, or you're gonna break code to, do this one tiny little thing, and your line of code is gonna be inserted into a million other lines of code. Like, I had a hard time understanding the meaning of it. Like, I've always been somebody that has thought about the long game here, and, like, if I'm gonna spend the next 40 years of my life, like, is this literally what the next 40 years is gonna look like? And I was on call, so, you know, programming would break, something would happen, and the beeper at the time would go off back when we had pagers instead of cell phones. I'm dating myself now. And, it'd be a Friday night or whatever, and you're like, "Does it really matter that
Mm,
like, we're not doing brain surgery here, like, what?" So, I struggled with the meaning making of it, and a deep sense inside of me that I wanted more, but I didn't know what that really looked like.
okay.
And then I felt it again when I was at Oracle, traveling the world was amazing, exciting in your early 20s. You're going to Germany and South Korea, and you're selling software, and you're just like, it's the epitome of that fun
Mm,
corporate career moment. But also, I had a dog and a house, and I was never home, and, like, I would come home and scoop up the mail and leave again, and I felt like I had a life, but I wasn't actually living my life,
mm,
and that also really bothered me that, like, all of this time is going by, and this is fun,
yeah,
but what else? Like, I was ready for something more than fun.
yeah. There's a lot of I have a 18-year-old now. I know your son is crazy, right?
Yeah. Like,
Um, in fact, yesterday was his last day of high school, and we've been talking about, a lot of what the future looks like. It seems like it's, uncertain just given the time that we're living in. But how important do you think that was for you? Like, if you were looking back, in that part of your career saying, "Look, I had to kinda go through that to realize that moment and realize that wasn't for me." Like, if you're looking back on that, was that foundational? Did you have to go through that to kinda make that leap of, where I wanna go next?
I do believe that's the case, at least for me. I mean, I think coming out of college, we have a sense that I'm going to go get this job. I'm going to be successful in that job. And that job is going to lead to the next thing that I will be successful in. And I'm going to ladder together all these successes. And what I learned is that sometimes you advance and sometimes you learn. And both of those things are good, right? And for me personally, the first, call it 10, a little more than 10 years of my career, I can now see through the lens of perspective that I was picking up nuggets along the way. But when I was in the middle of those experiences, they didn't make sense to me. Like, on their own, you can only see the circumstances and the situation and how you feel. And you're like, oh, this stinks. I'm getting up and I'm going to work. But now that I look back on it, I'm a lot older now. It's almost like that tapestry where you only see the knotted, tangled ends. But at some you get to a place in your life where you get to turn that over and you go, oh, I see what we were making. Right. And
Yeah.
so a lot of what I do now, I would not be doing if I had not had those experiences. I would not be doing them the way I'm doing them. I wouldn't have some of the skills that I have because I can look back and go, oh, I picked up, that nugget there and this nugget there. And, you sort of put them in your basket. And then at some point, you've got a full enough basket to go do the next thing in your life.
Yeah, I think that's good advice for people say as they're I work in a couple entrepreneurship centers at the college level, and that's always the worry is like, hey, do I just go straight into entrepreneurship? Do I get some experience first? Do I go work for somebody else? And there's lots of different perspectives on that. But I think, thinking about your journey, it's like, and mine too, like I started off as a teacher, right? I didn't mean to, stumble into entrepreneurship, but I had to go through that period of my life to get to where we eventually ended up. So what was that moment where you know, it was kind of like the last straw, so to speak. And you said, it's time to do this thing, that I've been thinking about.
Yeah. Well, the last straw is a really good way to put it. Eh, I did not have one of those moments where I'm like, I'm going to start a company. Let me go be an entrepreneur. I did not enter entrepreneurship that way. I had what I like to call my Elle Woods Legally Blonde moment, where You just sort of wake up one day and you're like, "I don't wanna do this anymore. I think I'm gonna go do this other thing." That was literally me. So I had just come home from a very long trip when I was working for Oracle, doing the dump the laundry, repack the suitcase, get the dog taken care of, scoop the mail, and had the recognition that my parents were going to be flying in for Thanksgiving, and I was not going to be there to pick them up because I was going to be on the road. And then I would be home for Thanksgiving, but I needed to get back on the road, and my parents were gonna have to take themselves to the airport. And I thought to myself, I feel like maybe my values might be a little out of whack here in terms of my priorities. And I know this is not what I want. I didn't know what I did want, but I knew I didn't want that. And so being in my 20s, I made a very illogical, I'm just going to quit right now decision, which I would not recommend anybody do. I did. I went ahead and quit. And then I was like, oh, I have to feed the dog and pay for my mortgage and put gas in my car. And how am I going to do that? And I didn't really want to go work for another big company, having had the two sort of back to back big company experiences. So I just thought to myself, what do I know how to do that I could get somebody to pay me to do? And started doing it.
Hmm.
And led to my first business. And a year later, it was $1 million business. It was in the consulting and services space. And I sort of backed my way into being an entrepreneur.
Yeah. So that's an interesting point. It was kind of a values alignment for you where you're like, hey, I'm not living what I think to be true about the way I want my life to work anyway. Right. And I guess the parents was part of that. It's like, hey, I'm not home for my family. I'm gonna be in and out. And that moment sparked that. But what happened, I think people struggle with this idea, that moment where like, hey, yeah, like I feel conviction about this. I'm gonna go do this thing now. And they're not getting the signals right away, or maybe even their family is saying to them, "What are you doing? You just quit your big job. What happened? What are you thinking?"
If you live in a community where being an entrepreneur is not the primary pathway, right? I mean, and I lived in Detroit, so almost every one of my friends and family worked for one of the automotive companies or automotive suppliers and like very much the corporate path. At the time I started my first company, I was the only entrepreneur I knew. And so a lot of people were like, what kind of early midlife crisis are you having here? Because makes no sense whatsoever.
So how did you know? How did you know that you were on the right path?
I don't know that I did. At first, there was a lot of like, "What did I do? Maybe I made a mistake. This is hard," right? I mean, it's not all sunshine and roses. I love the movie Legally Blonde, and it's amazing she gets to go to Harvard and works for a top law firm and wins her case, but, like, no, that's not actually how it really works in real life usually. So, it was hard, right? I mean, I struggled to pay the bills, and I didn't know what it meant to run a company, so and again, to date myself, like we did not have ChatGPT to go ask, how do I incorporate a business or all those questions. So it was a lot of trial by error and just trying to figure it out and every day getting up going, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to just figure out how to advance this ball today. And the lesson that I learned from that is that sometimes the biggest thing you can do is just do it, right? You just got to get up and you got to make progress. You got to you don't know what perfection is going to look like. You just got to do stuff and you pay attention to what's working and you do more of that and you pay attention to what's not working and you do less of that and you sort of winnow down to the things that are working. But I also talk about my first company kind of like a as my starter company. First house, it's your starter house. You make a big mess of it when you try to drywall or whatever.
Yeah.
That was my first company, right? I had no idea what I was doing. I look back on it now and go, "Oh, I could have done a whole lot of different things than I did." But I did the best that I knew how to do in that moment and with the resources and the support that I had or didn't have. And it was actually that set of experiences that really created the foundation for what I'm doing now, that there are Donnas and Garys in every city in
Mm.
America and around the world, and they're smart cookies, and they've probably got ideas, and they probably have no idea how to turn it into a business. And we can help them do that. Having lived it first really gives me a sense of understanding and empathy for we all remember that rookie feeling. And I want to help more rookies be able to get started.
Amazing. So you're taking that experience, consulting company, and then what happened with that? So what did you do with that? And then how was that the springboard to, and I'm assuming at some point our paths are going to connect in this story.
I mean, I was running the company and it was a services business. So I would go and I would sell the consulting engagement and then I would deliver the engagement. And then I started selling more than I could deliver. So I hired people to deliver. And then I was like, oh, wait, now that I've hired people, I need to go sell more engagements. And now I need to hire more people. The next thing you know, I'm on this hamster wheel going, wait, this is not, where does this hamster wheel end exactly? And I know now, well, there's a big difference between building a services business and a product business and, concepts like recurring revenue and, all of those things, which were totally new to me, right? I was getting my MBA at the same time I was building my business. So I didn't know these things. And so I knew that I was enjoying the concept of not working for a big company. I was enjoying being able to be my own boss and build something. I was not enjoying the services business model at all. And so we made some attempts to convert into a product company. We weren't able to raise capital to do it, right? There were, I think at the time, 2 venture capital firms in the entire state. So 100% of them rejected us. And I was
Your
like,
loss, by the way.
this is not how I want to spend my time.
Mm.
So made the difficult decision to close that down, and I joined a tech company in Ann Arbor, and then that led to launching my next company. Once I got that experience, I launched a tech company and then sold that company and moved to DC, did another company and then Startup America and then 1776, and you and I connected there at 1776. Those early days got me on the pathway of I really enjoy building new things, and I especially enjoy building new things when they can tackle a systemic issue and solve it at the root.
Mm.
I really love that. I've learned that over the years that that's what I love to do.
So it's interesting when you talk about that journey. For those that don't, know 1776, and that's where Donna and I first met. It was a startup incubator in DC, very new to DC at that time. This was kind of like revolutionary. But at what point, because I know you in that period of your life as a really a systems thinker. And at what point did you stop thinking about Anna is creating opportunities, and I'm learning each one of these stepping stones is becoming the next thing that I do to, hey, there's a system that's not working in lots of places. I have this in my notes as I was prepping for this. I was like, America needed 1776. In so many ways, that is true. In fact, I have a picture I'm going to show you. from that from that period of time, because I do want to talk about this because this was such a fun period. At what point did you let's see if it pops up here on the screen. There we go. At what point did you stop thinking about like, hey, for those of you that are not watching the YouTube, this is a picture of Donna, Evan, and myself. I think my hair was like I must have been wearing a hat that day or something.
Yeah, I have different hair now.
With David Cameron, who had come to visit from the UK, who's the prime minister. But at what point did you stop thinking about like, hey, these things can help Donna advance to the next thing she wants to do, but I want to be the person that helps other people learn from these things, build systems around this. And what was that thesis behind 1776 when you guys started?
Yeah. When I prior to 1776, when I had my son, I took a good long maternity leave. And on maternity leave, it was really the first time that I'd had a chance just to take a breath from entrepreneurial company building. And I started thinking a lot about my experiences and how hard they had been, but they didn't actually need to be as hard as they were. The kind of like lacking support, the fact that there wasn't capital. I was trying to build in a city where there wasn't a culture of entrepreneurship. There were no mentors. It was a lot of like, I'm just trying to figure this out as I go. And the impact that that has on cities that like if the Donnas and the Garys in the cities aren't actually taking action on their ideas and if they're floundering around, that means we're not creating jobs. And like that part has always struck me. So when I was on maternity leave, I spent some time just really thinking about like if I were gonna wave a magic wand and put something in place, what would it be? And the concept that I was imagining is what I called grassroots entrepreneurism. Like every good entrepreneurial thinker, I put it all down on a piece of paper. I was like, I don't know if this is a business. What is this? Let me get it out of my head, put it on a piece of paper, shared it with some friends, and ultimately ended up getting hired at Startup America with Steve Case and the Kauffman Foundation and Gene Case, and to really jumpstart American entrepreneurial growth. Right? Everyone had the recognition that startups create jobs and we needed jobs at that moment. It was 2011 and recession, recovery, no jobs. And so had a chance at Startup America to take what I had put together on that document and bring it to life, and went and recruited people like me all over the country to say, wait a minute, let's make Detroit and Des Moines and Dallas and every city really good places to build businesses. So what will that take? And I really enjoyed that work. I met just wonderful, incredible people around the country who were like, yeah, why should I have to go to Silicon Valley to build a business? Let's do this. Let's make our city better. And it was really fun. And when you look back now, those are the folks that created the Dallas Entrepreneur Center, 1871, the Entrepreneur Center in Nashville, and like all the incredible things that you see going on in cities, you can trace the threads to this group of amazing people. And so that became the pivot point in my career of I'm building something for myself to I'm actually building something systemically to make this better for others. And then when Startup America wound down, I live in the DC area and thought everyone's doing it everywhere else. Let's do this in DC. And if we think about DC, we often go, oh, politics, government, but if you look at it through the lens of talent, we have an incredibly talented community here. And we felt like if we could activate that talent around solving problems that really mattered and create a place and a fund and events and convenings to make that happen, that not only could we actually launch businesses that did that, but we could create a hub of activity in the city that would bring those innovators and the community together. And we all had a lot of fun doing it. And I still wear my 1776 t-shirt and I still see people out and about in their shirts. And it's just really fun to see what that created. And, you know, there's a lot of other now exciting things that have taken the place of 1776 in the district. And it's just really fun to see how that kind of activity can help more and more entrepreneurs or would be entrepreneurs imagine themselves taking action and starting something.
Well, I have to say I've benefited from your vision, because I remember it was actually my sister, Lathia. So we had just started Ed Backer, and it was my sister Lathia saw an ad. Of course, she was on social and she just graduated from school, and she was like, "Hey, there's this 1776 thing. We should go check it out." And so my mom actually drove her, and she put down the check because they just did it without me, and said, "Hey, I think you need to go do
We
this."
you up.
Yeah, because I don't know if I would have done it because I was out in Fairfax at the time, and I remember, just thinking, this is really one of those 50 chairs moments, because I think when we came in, we were that first cohort. You hadn't finished the build out yet, but people were coming in, and it was just so exciting. So walk me, like, from my perspective, it looked like I could see the vision. Donna was selling this vision, and I was buying it, because I was like, yes, I want that future that you are talking about, but it wasn't there yet. And what was that like from your side of that conversation?
Yeah. I mean, people thought we were pretty crazy, right? If you put this in moment in time, right? This is before it became the norm for there to be big hubs. This is pre WeWork, pre, you know, incubators and the accelerator boom. And we started with the theory of how can we find and fund companies that are in these industries that DC has unique talent in, which it turns out they're all government regulated or government involved, right? Education, transportation, smart cities. And if you look at what Silicon Valley was focusing on at the time, it was not these kinds of regulated industries. So we felt like this was a unique opportunity to build something in those areas. And then people would be like, well, startups don't exist in DC. What are you talking about doing this in DC? There are no startups in DC. With that, there are, you just don't see them. and you don't see them because there's no hub, there's no convening place to bring them together. So while people mostly remember the space to us was like, well, I guess we need to have a space if we're going to do the thing that we want to do.
Mm,
And it turned into this really remarkable place, a really special place. So we started meeting with landlords, and we're like, we want 30,000 square foot of space. And no, we don't have any money in the bank. And no, we haven't incorporated yet. And yes, we know we're talking about these startups that we believe exist, but you don't know for sure. And it was a lot of like vision, a lot of vision casting. And we had a lot of amazing supporters that were like, we get it. We're in. Like, we
mm,
believe this vision too. And it was everything from the mayor's office to, the universities that all were like, yeah, if you build it, we'll participate. And when you think about building a startup, we were doing what it is we encourage startups to do, which is you got to project the bigger footprint than you have. You got to build the ship and while you're sailing it. And you're going to be paddling like crazy underneath to deliver. And we had a great team that we would not have been able to execute what we had as a vision without, people like Brittany and some of our earliest team members that were just amazing that were like, "Yep, I'm in." Like Brittany, for instance, is like law school graduate, could have gone and got a big job at a law firm. She's like, "Nope, I'm gonna come join this scrappy startup." But we had so much fun, and it was really amazing when we did the grand opening party. The space, as you know, was not done yet, hard hat zones and the whole 9 yards, but the line was down the block, and we heard stories from our landlord that people were asking him if he opened a nightclub in the building because they didn't know why there was a line in front of the building on a Friday night. And it was the right thing at the right moment, and a lot of stakeholders that bought into and were excited about the vision, which it turned out to be, we were correct about our hypothesis, and much of what has been built since then in terms of the focus of the startup ecosystem here in DC has built on some of those early ideas.
I just wanna personally thank you because that environment really helped me. Now I had a previous company, but I was new to that area. So many questions I wanna kinda tease out of there because you talked about team, and that's important, getting values alignment to kinda where what you were talking about earlier. I think sometimes founders struggle with, I've got this big vision, but, I can't get that person who just graduated from Harvard or, wherever it is, or they just have this amazing credential. They wouldn't even contemplate them joining their team if they could get them aligned. So walk me through those bits. It's like, okay, I found like one person. It's kind of like, have you ever seen that video of building a movement where there's one guy dancing and then, and it kind of goes along. Like, walk me through that building a movement part of 1776.
Yeah. I mean, it is something that has to happen bottom up and top down. Oftentimes people think that, and a movement can ignite organically, but sometimes you gotta light the fires to force it to happen. And I think we benefited from some of the organic nature, but there was definitely some fire lighting going on to help make that happen. And I think our core team all recognized the importance of demonstrating momentum in this, right? Oftentimes, when we think about building a startup, we think sequentially. I'm going to raise the money, I'm going to build this thing, I'm going to get the customers, I'm going to do the press release, I'm going to grow. And we kind of flipped that around and we said, we got to paint the vision and we got to get stakeholders in that we can draft off of their footprint and their influence. We've got to project momentum and we have to execute and deliver on the things that we're talking about. And so things like the event strategy, inviting the prime minister of the United Kingdom to come. And we were certainly the beneficiary of being in a very powerful city. But because we did a lot of publicity and PR on social media and announcing of things and really thinking ahead of what could we do that could be announceable and could convey the conviction around the vision,
Mm.
that we got a lot of inbound inquiries. And the funniest story, we had literally just had the grand opening party. The paint on the walls were literally still wet. And I got an email from a obscure Google Gmail account asking if I would be willing to get on the phone and talk about what we were building at 1776, and be really easy to be like, "Who is this clown emailing me? I'm not gonna call you, forget it."
Yeah.
But we were at that point that we're like, all conversations, we're gonna have them. So I got on the phone and it turned out to be the chief of staff for the Queen of Jordan who wanted to come for a visit,
Wow.
right? So like
Yeah.
projecting momentum,
Mm.
people get enamored with the vision, right? Like you, it wasn't so much we're going to build a space. It was the vision of what we thought DC could become. And it was the vision of who we were as people in DC. And we really hit on the nerve that a lot of people come to DC because they want to change the world. They
Mm.
just define that through the lens of public service. And we were redefining it through the lens of entrepreneurship. And that really captured the imagination of the city. And so that really helped then create the conditions that people wanted to engage in the things that we were putting out. And then we would get these tentpole moments like the visit from the Queen of Jordan, or my favorite visit from Madeleine Albright, and President Obama came. And it
Yes.
was really amazing because people will go, "Oh, what is going on there? Like there's something really interesting there."
Yeah. Donna, I have to say, I have a picture with each one of those, with the Queen, with Madeline Albright, when I gave her a T-shirt in startup fashion. We had our swag, and I think I broke all kinds of etiquette in giving it to her, but we did it anyway.
Totally. I mean, I remember the moment that Evan and Brittany and I had the realization that the Queen of Jordan was in fact coming, and not a one of us knew the etiquette for greeting a queen. And so we called the State Department and we were like, "Did you know that? Could someone come and help us?" So we got like a quick primer on how one greets royalty.
Yeah, that's not everyday stuff, but there was this magic. It felt like magic being there, and I know that, like you said, on top, you guys look like you were cool, calm, cool, and collected, but like the ducks, underneath, you guys were paddling away, and it worked.
Yeah. But I have never worked harder in my life. And at the time, we joked earlier about how old our kids are, but I had a toddler. My son was 3 at the time, and, we put a little hard hat on him, and he was riding his bike and his tricycle around the space while we were building it. And when we did the Challenge Cup competition around the world, we literally divided up 72 cities amongst us, and we each took 30 some odd cities and hit the road. And I hit the road with my family and dragged them all across the planet. And it was a very fun but exhausting 5 years.
How was so let's pause on that for a moment, because there is a kind of hidden cost to being an entrepreneur. And it's not something that it's definitely not in the brochure on the on the startup community hubs. But there is this hidden cost. And I know, I saw that with I saw your husband there at the events, and I saw your son there at the events, and I had my own 2 little kids at that time, going through my own struggles. But what was that? How did you deal with that part of the journey, knowing like, hey, I know what we're doing is important, but I also have to be present with my family and be a mom and, do all of the things that come along. And what were those sacrifices?
Yeah. I can't overstate how hard that is, right? I mean, when you're an entrepreneur with a vision and you have high conviction about the thing that is in your mind that you want to build, it's really important to bring your family along on that vision because they get the short end of the stick a lot, right? Like, there were many evenings when there was an event happening at 1776 and I wasn't home for bedtime for my son. And your spouse has to pick up the slack. And that gets hard, especially if they don't understand the why, right? The why matters so much. And it's one of the reasons I tell entrepreneurs this stuff is hard, right? So, if you're going to pick a lemon that's worth the squeeze, right? Like I would not have started another company after 1776 if I did not have an extremely high degree of conviction that what I was building was needed in the world. You got to really have a big why here because it's hard stuff. And you have to have a community around you and be able to both talk about it, but also have spaces where you let it go. And I always say my husband and I are very, very different people. He's very much the okay with the corporate 9 to 5. I don't really wanna ever have to start something. He doesn't
Yeah,
understand my world at all,
yeah.
and I don't understand his world, and what that allows is that when we come home, we don't have to talk about either one of those things,
Hmm.
and so it gives us space to let those things go and focus on other things. But you can't there's no work-life balance. It's more like work-life integration, which is why my kid was at events all the time, and my husband was always coming, and they went on the road with me as much best as I could, and I was lucky that he was in preschool at the time, so I could just yank him out and drag him around the world, and we have pictures of him in all these countries around the world, and he remembers, the camel ride in Jordan and, swimming in the Dead Sea, he has these great memories that were at the right moment in time, so it ended up being really a beautiful thing for us. But, when he would go to school and they would ask what your parents do for a living, he would say, "My mom has parties for a living." So, he didn't quite understand the full vision.
I love the no work-life balance, but work-life integration, because I think that's probably a healthier way to think about it. I know if you are a founder and you have family, that's always a struggle. Integrate in. One more question in regards to that. How did you bring that why into your family so that they did understand, like, "Hey, this is important work."
Yeah, at first, I did not do a good job of it, right? It was very much like, "I'm gonna do this. This is my business." And then there was conflict, conflict, conflict. "Why don't
Mhm.
you support me?" That usual, like, stuff, and we only look at it from our own lens, and I have been much smarter about it with what I'm doing now, but we've had a lot of conversations over these years around my why, my connection to this thing, why I feel like this thing is necessary, why I think it's so important to do it. And my why for both 1776 and now Builders and Backers is not money. It's not personal gain. I want to make $1 billion. And I mean, I wouldn't I wouldn't say no to those things. But I look at it through the lens of something is broken. There is a massive opportunity to fix this thing, and if we can fix it, it'll be really good for the world. Like, that really, really motivates me, and
So
being able to share that with him, I don't know that he really understood that until he came to I delivered the commencement address at American University a handful of years ago, and I gave, the story of my journey and the sort of tapestry example of how it all fits together, and I think being able to tell that whole story so that he could connect what I'm doing now to the things that I have been through and done and lived
mhm.
in life made it easier for him to understand, "Okay, I get why she does the crazy things that she does, and I might not understand them all, but I'm gonna support her in doing it."
Wow, that's powerful, Donna. Because I think, you know, I can only imagine your husband listening to that conversation and knowing all the dots and being like, I can see that I can see it all align. That's a powerful moment.
And he's a part of that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I would not have moved to Washington, DC, where I met him, if
Mm.
I had not had these other experiences in my life. And some of those experiences were good and some of them were horrible. And being able to see how it all fits together.
I love that. So, I know when I left 1776, I went to Austin, and then, I kind of see like the acquisition of 1776, and then I was like, what is Donna working on? There was a little quiet period, and understandably so, given the intensity of those 5 years. But in that period of time, and I don't know how much time it was, what were you thinking about? What are those lessons that you learned from 1776 that you were just kind of thinking about, like, hey, if I did this again, here's what I might have done differently.
Yeah. Well, I thought at the time, I will never do that again. So never say never. There was a period of just, I'm exhausted and I need to have a life and like, let me get back on a workout plan and we're renovating our house and things that have nothing to do with business. But much like when I had been on maternity leave and I was percolating on the sort of how do we help the communities do better at this? I started percolating on some of the things that I had been frustrated with at 1776, which is, and frustrated is not the right word. I think it is untapped opportunity that despite how special it was and how amazing it was to be a great convening place, it struck me that we were at this moment in time in society where everybody was angry at everybody. We're massively divided as society, but yet a lot of the things that we're frustrated with, we could be solving if more of us were focusing on entrepreneurship as a way to do that, right? Like where big problems exist, there are big opportunities for innovative solutions. And my frustration that entrepreneurship had seemed to be becoming less about solving big problems and more about building companies so we could blitzscale and create unicorns and get returns alone, right? We sort of lost the balance perspective on that. And so I started percolating on a thesis around, don't more Americans have ideas than are actually getting started? And don't people see entrepreneurship as a solution? Couldn't we actually get more people to start things so that we could stop focusing on who sits in a chair in a white colored house and start focusing more on let's actually try solving some of these things? And so I just started poking at that. So my quiet period was about 18 months and it was very much a sabbatical of I'm going to go explore this. I'm going to go research and learn and talk to people. And I read literally thousands of books and reports and talked to people all over the United States. And ultimately, despite my reticence to start something new, Builders and Backers emerged from that. And it, for me, is a extremely high conviction decision to do what I'm doing now because I fundamentally believe we have barely scratched the surface of the talent in our country and around the world. And as much as we are excited about entrepreneurship and building infrastructure to support entrepreneurs, that infrastructure is largely not reaching sort of everyday people who have ideas. And the way that they could be building those businesses are not aligned with venture capital mechanics, which necessitates some alternative approaches. So that's what we have been quietly building at Builders and Backers. We have been at this now for about 5 years. We've helped thousands of people get started, and we're about to put several zeros on the back end of that.
Amazing. I'm just thinking, we'll put in the show notes where they can link to the resources that you're building with builders and backers. But one of the things I was thinking about, Donna, as you were describing that quiet period, is you've done a lot thinking about access to entrepreneurship. And I see this even locally in my own community, right? Outside of these big hubs, there's really no place. And I feel like a lot of people struggle with like, hey, where do I go? Like, who do I talk to? And there's just not these systems in place that you talk about. Through your research in that time, what were those barriers? Like, what stops people from pursuing these dreams? Because I believe it is America is a startup, and we're approaching our 250th year anniversary of that. What stops people from pursuing that based on kind of what you've learned?
One of the biggest challenges is that we've stopped seeing ourselves as an entrepreneurial nation. Even though we love Shark Tank and we love watching it and it feeds that like dream in us, and two-thirds of Americans have an entrepreneurial aspiration, dream, idea. Right. So it's not a lack of ideas. It's not a lack of dreaming about it. The challenge is that we have all been taught what we talked about earlier, that the path in life is go to college, get the job, work your way up the career ladder. Every conversation that we have about our economy is framed as jobs. Go get a job. Oh, this job's going away. Get a different job. Let's retrain you for a job. We don't talk about it through the lens of building. And when we do talk about entrepreneurship, it has increasingly become about unicorns and who is investable and can this scale. And we've lost sight of what we call building. It's actually why we use the word builder rather than entrepreneur, because one of the very first things I heard when I went around the country is people could name problems they cared about. They could name ideas they had for solving them. And when I would say, why not entrepreneurial stuff? Why not launch something? They would go, I'm not, I'm not an entrepreneur. Because in their mind, an entrepreneur is a young tech guy in a vest and it's the person on Shark Tank. It's not me. I'm a lawyer. I'm a bartender. I'm a nurse. So I don't see myself that way. So we have an imagination problem in terms of imagining ourselves as builders and embracing that idea that I too could build something. And then we have an on-ramp problem. And that's actually where we focus at Building Backers, those two things, the on-ramp despite the fact that we've spent $1 trillion as a country in the United States alone on startup infrastructure,
Mhm.
less than a quarter of a percentage point of any city's population is actually showing up. Two-thirds of people have ideas, a quarter of a percent are showing up.
A quarter of a percent.
Only 2% of people with ideas actually do anything with them, right? So we've built all this infrastructure, and people like me have spent, years of their life investing in building this infrastructure to support people who want to start businesses, but we aren't reaching that, right? And so that is a whole mix of things that present challenges that is for a different conversation. We don't have time to go into that, but we wholeheartedly believe that we could be reaching the two-thirds that have ideas. We can be inspiring people to go, yeah, why not me? And by the way, this moment with AI actually makes it possible for that nurse or that farmer or that bartender or
Mhm.
whomever to bring their idea to life. You don't need money. You don't need technical experience. You don't need to live in a certain city. And so we help people do that. We provide human coaching, we provide AI coaching, we provide capital, and we've got some really unique methods that are based on frameworks that predict startup success. So we can not just use that to winnow out the needles in the haystack to invest in, but actually build the whole haystack. Let's use that to tell you, hey, you're falling short here, or you might want to focus there. And here's the things that you need to do if you really want to turn this into a successful company. And then we can feed that into this $1 trillion infrastructure that we've spent so much time building and so many amazing people across the country have invested their lives to create.
So, in if you were going to say in two words, is democratizing entrepreneurship part of the why of builders and backers?
It is. It is. And it is creating a system of starting and funding companies that actually enables more people to start and grow companies that can actually have an impact, whether that's creating jobs, being durable enterprises in their cities, tackling problems that matter. Yes, becoming a unicorn and providing returns, all those things. It's really about just increasing the throughput, getting more people started and ensuring more people can be successful. And it's not so much democratizing access to the thing that already exists,
Mm.
but reframing a little bit of how we do this in a way that actually makes it align with what we call everyday innovators, people like you and me, the teacher, you know, tech worker that hated showing up every day. Like there's Garys and Donnas in every city in the country and around the world. So let's take that discontent or let's take that career experience and go, yeah, go create something. We'll help you.
I love this, and I also get your newsletter. So I wanna talk about the most recent one because I love that story of it was the cobras, and yes, because I wanna talk a little bit about that because what startup incubators or startup culture has created in terms of their the pitch competition, and I've heard people call it a petting zoo and all kinds of things. But if you wouldn't mind, because I know not everybody has got your newsletter, what's that story? And then let's talk about pitch competitions for a second.
Yeah, so the story is that and I don't it's probably lore, but I had heard the story about some British administrators over India realized there was a cobra problem in Delhi, lots of cobras. And so they were trying to figure out how do we solve the cobra problem? And they decided that they would offer a bounty for every cobra that somebody killed and brought in, a dead cobra carcass. We'd get a bounty. Seems right, right? Seems logical. It's measurable, it's actionable. But what actually happened is that led to people breeding cobras in order to be able to then kill the cobra and bring it in and get the bounty. And so what started out as a really well-intentioned thing to move an important metric turned into being all about the metric and not about the action. So the metric ended up looking good. Lots of cobras, to dead cobras were being brought in, but it didn't actually solve the problem of the cobras and it actually made it worse. And so my premise of my Builders Field Guide yesterday in our newsletter was really all around I can't help but think pitch competitions are kind of like the cobras in our communities that we started hosting them because they were great ways to highlight and showcase the builders in our community and be able to get people to support them. And much like, bounties for cobras, that was a really good idea. But pitch competitions have taken on a life of their own. And it has become more about holding the pitch competitions than it has been about making sure that the companies in our communities are actually succeeding. And we spent a lot of time studying people will get the pitch check. What do they do with the pitch check? Do they actually invest that in building their company? We heard from founder after founder after founder that they're funding their company by pitch competition hopping. And so the problem is if it takes you 20, 30 hours to prepare for a pitch competition, that's 20, 30 hours not spent doing customer discovery, acquiring users, driving revenue. And so it ends up, the post is very research backed in terms of some of the data that's out there. And there's some really interesting data that pitch trained founders are actually less likely to do some of the things that drive success for their startups. And so it's become breeding cobras
Yeah.
as the focus. And I write this always with a bit of hesitation because I don't want people to think I'm anti ecosystem, I'm anti pitch competition, I'm anti venture fund. I'm none of those things, but I am pro outcome.
Mm.
And if the data is not showing that the outcome is being delivered, we ought to be rethinking the strategy. And we should be optimizing for more people starting and more of those companies being able to become successful, profitable, growing companies. But we've started optimizing more for how many events are we having and how many pitch competitions and photo ops with checks and things like that. And so we just advocate that we should maybe focus less on the optics of those things and more on the substance of why we started having those things in the first place.
Why do you think that's happening? Why did we evolve from this something that was good? And I'll just say, like, I have personally benefited from pitch competitions, but I can see.
Of them. So
In fact, I met Pearson through a pitch competition. That acquisition probably wouldn't have happened otherwise. But that said, there's always an evolution of something. Something that starts out good can turn into something bad if you don't even remember why you were doing it in the first place. So why have we gotten to this place?
yeah.
Or why do you think we have?
I mean, I don't think there's a simple, it's just because this one thing. I do think there's some dynamics at play. Some of it is funder created, right? So the funder wants the metrics that aren't necessarily the same metrics that are tied to companies growing, right? How much, so they want the photo op, they want the PR opportunity. They don't, and I've actually had this conversation with a major university that runs a pitch competition that is a very, very large one and literally said, we don't actually care if they launch companies, right? Like
Mm,
there is some of that going
yeah,
on,
yeah,
where we're really focused on the outcome of the competition, not the outcome of the companies participating in the competition. And those are kind of related, but they're not the same thing.
yeah.
And then I'll just say, and we're getting ready to publish some research on this, that despite really, really good intentions in a lot of ecosystems around the world, many people who are responsible for programming to help startups, they themselves have no startup experience. And so what ends up happening is you do the best that you know how to do, which is you look at what other communities are doing and you go, oh, we should do that too. Or you get told to do those things because some high placed person of influence in your community goes, this other city is doing this. Why aren't we doing this? And you end up with this sort of machinery in the ecosystem that becomes about the ecosystem and not so much about the companies in the ecosystem. And I think a lot about some of the research from Start America. We did a big survey where we asked the same set of questions to ecosystem leaders and founders in their cities. And they were around the strength of the ecosystem. And what we found is that on every single dimension, the ecosystem leaders thought their community was far stronger than the entrepreneurs themselves. Like, I think there's some of this dynamic as well. And I'm not by any stretch of the means saying not to have pitch competitions. I think for a lot of founders who don't have access to capital, they don't have the friends and family that are supposedly out there that I did not have. Getting a pitch check is huge and it can provide needed capital. And as you said, there, if it's a well-run competition at the right audience, you can make connections that otherwise would not be possible. But the flip side is oftentimes the founder with charisma and stage presence and the ability to give a good presentation wins, not necessarily the company that has the best characteristics for creating a high scale company. And that causes those founders to maybe not be able to get the resources and attention that they need to build their company because we're looking at flash rather than substance and a lot of those things. So we're not fans of thin thinking around
Yeah.
ecosystem stuff. We really are fans of like deep conviction thinking. We should be constantly looking at what's working. What are we optimizing for? And are the strategies we're using actually achieving those things or not? If we're having pitch competitions as a key piece of that, then let's be clear about what we think those competitions are doing for us in our community. Let's also be clear about what they're not doing for us and put other things in place to do those things.
And as part of the work at Builders and Backers that you're, that I love this type of conversation always is amazing to me too, because I've lived in so many different cities. I've lived in Austin and I've seen, Capital Factory. I was at 1776. Now I'm here in Tampa. There's Embark. But I feel like a lot of these cities don't talk to each other in terms of like the sharings and learnings. And, when I look at the research that you're putting out with Builders and Backers, it's like, man, why aren't more people sharing this data? Is that part of the mission?
Yeah, we didn't set out to do that because we really didn't set out to go, what are ecosystems doing well and what are they not doing well? We really set out to solve the one problem, which is how do we get the two-thirds and three-quarters of Americans with ideas to get started? That's the problem we're most interested in solving. But in discovering why they're not getting started, we've had to tentacle out to go, wait a minute, like, let's look at some of this stuff and ask. And I feel like I'm in a good position to be able to do that because I take responsibility for some of this. I mean, through my role at Startup America and through the network that created and the folks that I've been working with, there was a vision of what needed to be done to make communities a stronger place. We have embraced that with gusto around the country, and it's amazing. But I also think we are ready for what we call ecosystem building 2.0. And a lot of the research that we've done and we're starting to release, as we talked about through this week's newsletter, a sense of, wait a minute, like it's time to go. That was great. Now we're ready for the next version. And it's more a celebration of what's been done. And now let's build on that as opposed to a critique. And because, the cities you've named and many others, like I know the people that are building those initiatives. And I'm like, yeah, like you, like me, we've spent the last 10, 15 years of our lives doing this hard work rather than things that were probably easier and probably paid better because we care about our cities. And so we're counting on that there will be fresh soil to hear the message, that people will hear it in the vein that it's being offered, which is like, I'm you, we're with you. We want to do this better collectively. And let's take what we've done well and now let's iterate on that based on what's possible today.
Into that, Donna. I think every city needs it. I think people need it. So I know we're almost at time, but I want to, for someone who's listening to this and they're like, "Hey, I'm stuck. I'm on that verge." What advice would you give them? What could they do in the next 7 days to be part of those 2/3 that that you're encouraging? Like, hey, there's more people that want to do this, but they need the 7 day like get started with Donna kit. What does that look like? What would you tell them to do?
Yeah. I mean, a couple easy things to do. One is I write Builder's Field Guide. It comes out about once a week, and it is squarely aimed at practical things I have learned that founders and ecosystem leaders need to know. And there are some very clear, like first steps articles in there that are easy, quick first reads. The second is this is why we created Builder Studio. It is very much it is meant for primarily people who are at that idea stage, two personas. I have an idea and I've done nothing. I have an idea and I started doing some things and it doesn't feel like it's working and I don't know why. If that's you, please come to Builder Studio. And it is a combination of AI, very small bite learning, think TikTok style videos, not days long or months long courses, and human guidance bundled together. And so you access that through Builder Studio. You can click the Get Help Now button for a human expert. And these are successful entrepreneurs that will get on the phone with you and help you wrestle it through, and events and convenings and the whole nine yards. So those are two things separate from our self-promotional commercial items. I think the biggest thing is that we forget that startups are nothing but a bundle of assumptions. And if you can come at your business from that lens, take out a sheet of paper and a pencil and write down everything you believe to be true about the problem, the customer, your solution, the world at large, and then circle the things that if you are wrong about that thing, the whole house is going to come tumbling down, right? Like if you're wrong about the paint color on the door, we can change that later. If you're wrong about the foundation, not so much. So figure out
Mm,
what those things are. And for most people, it's usually, I assume people will want to buy X. And then figure out the quickest way you can go test that in the real world. Is that a landing page? Is that a pop-up event? You think people will buy your soaps? Great. Like go do a pop-up event, try to sell your soaps. Like get real world evidence by actually trying to sell it to people to see if the dogs eat the dog food. And that's very easy to do in today's world. And this sort of be very assumptions focused, right? It's all about identifying an assumption, go test it, see what I learned. Let's iterate. So get up every day and do one thing. Like ask yourself every morning, what can I do today to advance my idea? And it might be read a report. It might be subscribe to Builder's Field Guide, listen to the podcast, but you know, momentum beats perfection every day. So get up and do something.
powerful words. Powerful words. Last question for you, Donna, as we wrap. I feel like there's this tension in the world right now around feeling agency. And in my experience, entrepreneurship gives you agency maybe when you feel like you're stuck or you feel like you're not, the world around you is changing so fast. What role has agency played in the people that you're seeing go through this process?
I'm so glad you asked this question because it was the very first thing I learned and shocked me when I was on my sabbatical doing my sort of research learning safari. Okay, when I went out and talked to folks and would hear about the problems that they saw and the ideas that they had, and we would talk about this entrepreneurship thing, they would use similar phrasing. I would hear a lot, somebody should do something about fill in the blank, right? Well, who is that somebody? Who do you think is coming to solve that problem? We have this real learned helplessness going on, which is, and by the way, I think it's normal in an industrial society where you go get a job and you're a tiny cog in the big wheel and your boss works 1,000 miles away and you work for a big company, like you don't actually have much control. And so we sort of apply that across life and think, I don't have much control about anything. And so I'm going to be outraged on TikTok and Twitter and like we have outrage porn going on and like, but we actually can do a lot more than we realize. And so we actually built our programming from that learning, which is that I can't really start teaching you to be an entrepreneur without addressing this agency question. Because if you don't see yourself as the person who can solve the problem, then my simply trying to convince you to be an entrepreneur is going to be spitting in the wind. So these two things go hand in hand. What's really interesting is so the first 4 years that we delivered our work, we asked every single one of the thousands of people that we worked with, pre and post programming, their sense of agency. And not surprisingly, like once you recognize that there are easy methodologies that are the way you launch companies that actually apply to a lot more things in life than just launching companies, it changes your view about yourself as a change maker and as a citizen and a resident of your community. And not surprisingly, these have very high correlation to democratic principles, right? And so if we think about what does it take to be a strong society, these things we think are very, very interconnected. So yes, we need more companies. Yes, we want more people to start startups, but we would love every single human on the planet to learn about these things because it's actually how we become strong as people and individuals in society. And we stop sort of wishing somebody would solve the problems and we become the solvers ourselves.
Well, that is the world and America that I want to live in, Donna. So I'm excited.
Which is why I'm doing my another startup.
Well, thank you for coming on today. Always appreciate seeing you. Any way that we can be supportive at 50 Chairs, we'll obviously do that. Thank you for the time.
Thanks for having me. It's really great to be here and good to see you.